This is The Toss-Up, where an expert line panel dissects the hottest stories within the world of sports. From some of the nation's strongest college programs right here in Bloomington to the games and moments that capture the world's attention, it's all right here on The Toss-Up. Terry Morin has gradually been building up her basketball program, and this year we might get to see more and more success on the court. Morin has led IU's women's team to 4 straight 21 seasons, including 2 NCAA tournament bids and a WNIT title. Last season, Indiana got off to a 10-0 start, but now the Hoosiers are getting recognized preseason with a top 25 ranking. The team's 4 leading scorers are all returning, but exactly how high can this team climb in a very top-heavy college basketball landscape? The women's basketball season will be a fun one to watch, so we've got a fun panel of experts right here to talk about it, led by Will Trubshaw on my right for IDS Sports. We've got Jared Rigdon on the other side of the chairs over here from HoosierNet, and Steph Kreisneck, an Indy Star contributor. So wonderful panel here. And we'll start off, we've seen, as I mentioned, this program is gradually seeming to sort of rise and sort of raise the bar. So, Will, I'll start with you as we head into this season. Where is the bar now? Like, what should we expect from this team?
Well, I mean, like you talked about, 2017 they won the women's NIT. Last year they make it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. There's no reason to think they can't take a next step. I think they're going to be a Sweet 16 caliber team. Once they get fully healthy, too, they're going to be one of the top teams in the Big Ten. Absolutely.
Sweet 16, impressive.
Yeah, I mean, this is easily the best team that Terry Morin has ever had in Bloomington, even with the teams that had Amanda Cahill and Tyra Buss. It's very deep. They've added a lot of size and depth to things that they lacked last year. I mean, like you said, I mean, they made the round of 32 last year. They were competitive with Oregon for a little bit. Now it's how can you take the next step to get past that round of 32, get into the Sweet 16, and start knocking off some of the top teams in college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that's setting expectations for themselves very high. I mean, they're not shying away. I mean, we've seen videos on social media, Brenna Wise going on Big Ten Network talking about how this team wants to host NCAA tournament, first round games, second round games. I mean, this is a team that's embracing those expectations. Last year, you got the turnaround, as you guys mentioned, going from Tyra Buss and Amanda Cahill to, Allie Petberg and Brenna Wise. There doesn't feel like there's too much pressure in terms of trying to fix that turnaround anymore. They know what their pieces are now. They know who their best players are going to be. Now they're able to, as you guys mentioned, build that depth, get a stronger team overall. And I agree with Jared. I think this is the best team that Terry Morin's had while she's been here.
Yeah, and honestly, going off that point, I mean, one of the big question marks last year was how will the pieces of Brenna Wise and Allie Patberg fit in, their first full seasons with the teams, and they were phenomenal. And they have 8 or 9 returners from last season's team. There's no reason to think they can't get better. The ceiling only goes up. It's hard to think there's going to be a regression. For sure.
Maybe the only 2 pieces they lost were Kim Royster and Lindsay Marchese. Royster started every single game, but they replace her, with girls like Mackenzie Holmes, with Jory Allen. I mean, they get back Kiana Wharton. They get back Chanel Wilson. I mean, this is a very deep team, and you can go 9 or 10 deep with this Hoosier squad.
Yeah, very deep squad, and tons of room for potential. But as we've seen with the women's college basketball landscape, very top-heavy. It seems like some of those teams like Oregon that knocked Indiana out of the tournament last year, the new #1. You've got Louisville, UConn. How big is that gap, and is there any way that Indiana can sort of bridge it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the gap is big. I mean, Indiana's going to take steps forward this season. They could host NCAA tournament games, but to compare them to a team like Oregon or the program that UConn's built, I mean, I'm pretty sure Indiana themselves will say that they're not there quite yet. Now, does that mean they can't compete with teams like that? No, not necessarily. I mean, they're going to face some really, really great teams in the non-conference play, and you'll kind of get a gauge to see where Indiana compares to those top teams. So not ready to compare them to Oregon yet or something like that, but when you look at Maryland, Michigan State, what they've been able to build in the Big Ten, there's potential to kind of start battling those teams. I mean, we saw them beat Michigan State last year. Weren't able to compete with Maryland as much. I mean, they beat a great Iowa team last year. So in terms of cracking the top 3 of that Big Ten, that's a very reasonable guess. But to start comparing them to, a top-heavy NCAA in the whole country. I don't know if they're there quite yet.
Yeah, I think you got to start off with closing the bridge, closing that gap in the Big Ten. I mean, you got to remember they played in the 7-10 game last year, the Big Ten tournament. You know, played a 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament, but Maryland is up there at the top. You know, you got Michigan State, Michigan, you know, Minnesota, and Rutgers are always very good teams. But if you can bridge the gap, you know, finish inside the top 4 in the Big Ten, that's where you got to start before you can start comparing yourselves to the top level teams in the NCAA who do it year in and year out. I mean, you never have to worry about if Louisville is going to finish at the top of the ACC or if UConn is going to finish at the top of their conference, because that's how those programs are built. And if IU can start finishing consistently in the top 4 of the Big Ten, then we can start maybe looking, all right, you know, how can this team start faring against those schools in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, you know, I'd have to agree with those sentiments. This team, there's no Gino Auriemma and a perennial National Player of the Year candidate on this team. It's not Oregon yet, but give it some time. You know, this is the first year where we have a really talented IU women's team that, again, it's probably the best collection Terry Morin's ever had. What they do this year, I think, will help decide in the future how competitive they can be with those Oregons or UConns or whatnot. But for now, I'd say kind of like that second tier. They're, you know, if they can compete in the top 10, they're in great shape. If they can get a higher seed in the Big Ten or in the NCAA tournament, Big Ten tournament, they're in good shape. But they're not upper echelon just yet.
And so to be able to compete into that top 10 range, it's going to be able to take a lot of key contributors, a lot of strengths. So Will, right off the bat, what are some of the strengths that this team has that's going to be able to allow them to compete?
Well, one thing is they've added a lot of height this year. Hannah Navarowski and Ariel Wisney, 2 centers coming in at about 6'5". That's nice. Obviously, defense is a strength, too. They'll miss a little bit with Bendu Yanni still out with recovering from her Achilles injury. They've got defense. I think they feel good about their shooters, too. You mentioned some of the names like Kiana Worthen, Grace Berger, coming back to complement Brenna Wise, who's a stretch 4, and Allie Patberg, who filled it up last year. You know, I think shooting, defense, they're in good shape. I like the size, too. I think, you know, last year with Kim Royster, good at center, but I think the freshmen they have coming in this year at another level there, and I think that's something that can separate you, too, especially on the defensive end.
So a ton of size. Jared, what else do you see on
They
the
got
team?
a lot of speed, too. I mean, they have so many talented players in the backcourt. I mean, you talk about an Allie Patberg, a Bendu Yanni, Jalen Penn, all this talent in the backcourt, they can get out and run, and that's something they want to do this year. You know, and when you have Kiana Wharton, you know, a second year under her belt, and you have Chanel Wilson, you know, this is a team that can allow Patberg to play off the ball a little bit, where last year, you know, they kind of looked out of funks when Patberg either wasn't in the lineup or just was struggling on a day. You know, now they can allow Patberg to play off that 2, you know, get open on the perimeter and create her own shot. And if they can get out and run, you know, they're going to cause a lot of teams trouble, especially teams that play a bigger lineup. They're not going to be able to keep up with the pace and speed that IU has.
Yeah, I mean, going off of some of those names you mentioned, this is a team that has a ton of experience so far. I mean, people think of Allie Patberg and Brenna Wise, they've only played 1 year at IU, but they've been around college basketball for a while. I mean, it's amazing how much Allie Patberg, I mean, she was at Notre Dame. She knows what it's like to be a part of a top program. Just because she hasn't played that much at IU doesn't mean that she doesn't have experience. And then you look at Jalen Penn, Bendu Yanni. I mean, they got some really, really experienced players. Where they might struggle, you mentioned some of those bigs. You're a little bit younger at the bigs, but at the guards, you're really experienced. I mean, and you mentioned Allie Patberg playing the 2. That would be huge. If you can get Chanel Wilson sometime at the 1, Allie Patberg might be the best 3-point shooter on his team. Granted, Brenna Wise, Jalen Penn, really sharp shooters themselves, but Allie Patberg can really, at the 2, make it really tough on some defenses. Chanel Wilson playing the 1. So when you take the experience that they've had at the guard position, that's going to be a real strength. And IU, in terms of guards, might, maybe aside from Maryland, have the best group in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and you go to a group where you can have Grace Berger, who stands 6 feet tall. She can handle the rock too. I mean, that's something that is a luxury in the women's game, is you have someone with that much size, and now she has a year under her belt. She looked really good last year, but you know, Terry Morin talked about, I haven't seen someone work in the gym so hard as Grace Berger has, which is, you know, awfully impressive praise, because she's coached Tyra Buss, Amanda Cahill, and Allie Patberg. But you know, she's looking at Grace Berger as someone that could potentially take the next step and really impress, and maybe allow, you know, Patberg and Penn to get off the ball a little bit.
Yeah, I think all that, it just speaks to, more than anything, I think their biggest strength is depth. There's so many pieces you can slot everywhere to, and a lot of versatile players as well. I mean, again, you look at Bendu Yanni, when she does come back, she's someone who's played at the forward or lower positions, or she can slot in at the guard too. She's versatile. Brenna Wise can be a 3, 4, even a 5 if they need. There are a lot of different pieces on this team that can go a lot of different ways, and that is a huge asset in the Big Ten.
I think one thing going off of that's really important. I mean, last year when Allie Pepper went out with injury, you saw what the flaw was in this team. They didn't really have a true point guard to come in and take that role. Now with Grace Berger, who had some experience last year at the one, you bring back Chanel Wilson. I mean, if, not saying Allie Pepper, obviously you want her to be healthy, that's first and foremost. But if something were to happen where Allie Pepper is not available, I think they're a lot more confident with how they're going to be able to get over that hump, and that goes back to that depth.
And so, I was going to say real quick, now we've been talking about a lot of hype around this team so far, but this isn't a top 5 team, top 10 team preseason. There have to be some weaknesses. So Steph, off the bat, real quick, what are some of the weaknesses that this team's going to have to overcome this season?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit hard for their bigs early on in the season, just because they're not that as experienced. You got a ton of freshmen coming in there, Jory Allen, as you guys mentioned. I mean, you lose Kim Royster and Lindsay Marchese, who might not have been the most impressive players out on the court, and you want to recruit players that are going to be a little bit more athletic than that, a little bit better than that, and that's the direction that Terry Moore is headed in. But right now, that group is really young in the bigs. So I think it's going to be a little tough to overcome. Alexa Gulbe is going to have to step it up a little bit. I know last year she showed signs of potential, but she's the one in that group that you kind of look at her as one of the more experienced players, just being a sophomore. I mean, they're going to have to rely on her a lot, playing the 4 or the 5. So I think that could be a position where they really struggle, at least early on in the season.
I look at the strength of schedule. I mean, you open the season with a couple, lesser foes, but there's a week and a half span where they play Baylor, South Carolina, Florida, and Miami, all away from home in a week and a half. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Nobody except UConn and Notre Dame does that. I mean, how they handle that week and a half stretch, I think, is going to go a long way in saying how they play this season, because you can either, whether they win or lose, it's how you handle those kind of games, against Baylor, defending national champions, how you respond after that week. Do you get down if you lose some games, or do you kind of get ahead of stuff if you play really well? It's how they handle the strength of schedule they have in the non-conference, and in the conference is going to be difficult. You have to play Maryland twice, Michigan, Minnesota, Michigan State, all these teams. How you handle those games is going to go a long way in showing how good this team actually can be.
Yeah, well, for me, the biggest weakness is health right now. Again, I've harped on it a bunch here in this first segment about Bender Yanni, how she's still recovering. But Coach was saying Jalen Penn is dealing with a little plantar fasciitis, and Allie Patberg is still getting back to 100%. Her stamina is not all there yet. So those are 3 key pieces. Those are 3 of the 4 returning starters who aren't exactly at 100%. So it'll be interesting to see how well they can play. And I think that's really going to put an onus, too, on that depth. Some of those players, again, Berger, Worthen, even Gulbe, just to have them step up off the bench in the early going. That's going to be the biggest test for me. I think that's one thing that could really hurt the Hoosiers here in the early going.
Yeah, depth will be a big thing down the line this season, but for us here on the Toss-Up, we've barely scratched the surface. So coming up after the break, we will be back with more IU women's basketball, plus it'll be game time. We'll have some fun, and I'll pass this ball around. I've been holding on to it too long, so stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up. Now, we've talked a lot about the IU women's basketball team so far, but now it's our turn to get into our very own game time. So welcome to the show. I'm here with Steph Kreisnick, Jared Rigdon, and Will Trubshaw. And the game we're running with today is a very simple over-under. We're going to have some fun with it. So, Will, I'm going to start off with you. We're going to talk about the wins that this team's going to get. Last season, the team had 21 wins. I'm going to put the over-under on 22.5. Toss you the ball, Will, once you give your answer. What do you got?
All right, I'm going to go over.
Over. High ball for you.
Yeah, I'm thinking they get about 23 wins this year. It's not going to be much over.
Right in the line.
I think it's going to be influenced a lot by the start of the season here. I think the Big Ten, they will be good. Last year they finished 8-10 in conference. I think they're going to flip that number around, but I think they're going to have a little bit of a rough go in the early going against some of those really good teams.
Jared, 22.5.
I think they get over, but like Will said, just barely. I mean, you have so many tough games in the non-conference, and then in conference play, anything can happen, as we've seen before. But I will give them.
I think it's his ball.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I will give them the over, just because I know how talented and how deep this team is. But like I said, the schedule is pretty tough.
All right, Steph.
Give me that. Get out of here.
There we go.
I'm gonna go with the under. I think they're gonna do a little bit better in Big Ten play, especially because last year you got to consider they had that stretch where they lose Ali Pepper, and that's a reason they lost a lot of those games. But as Will has mentioned before, they got some injuries in the non-conference that they're still gonna try to battle back from, ease some players into it. And on top of which, you got a much tougher non-conference schedule this year. So I think just because they hit under, I don't necessarily think it's going to be a bad season. And you could still end up pretty high in the rankings, considering where you're going to be in the RPI and stuff like that. But I think in terms of win totals, non-conference and conference, I'm going to say that they hit the under.
All right. I'll take the ball back. And now we're going to start talking about the rankings. AP preseason poll puts this Hoosier team at 24. So the Hoosiers are ranked. But is there room to go up? Do the Hoosiers fall out of it? They do have some tough matchups coming up. So I'm putting the over-under at 17.5. Over represents, I'm going to clarify, over represents that they get a better ranking than 17.5. So Steph, what do you say? Over, under 17.5?
I'm going to go with over.
Over?
I think at some point, the non-conference, the difficulty of the non-conference schedule is going to be taken into consideration when those rankings come up. I mean, IU can go up in the rankings even with the loss. I mean, if you compete with a Baylor team or a South Carolina team, you're going to be pretty well represented in those rankings. Yeah. Then you go into Big Ten play when Indiana comes back, and they should be fully healthy at that point. I think that's when you kind of start moving up. You get an impressive Big Ten tournament, you can move yourself up a little bit more. And then, as we mentioned before, I think make it high enough in the rankings, it's a good chance that this team could end up hosting an NCAA tournament.
So real quick to jump in, do you think they beat a Baylor or a South Carolina?
No, I don't think they're going to win any of those games, especially being away from home. I think if they were at home, maybe you could put some of those teams on upset alert, but I don't think they're there quite yet.
Okay, Jared?
I'm also taking the over. I think that they're going to start the season well. Then they play Baylor and South Carolina, Washington State. They're going to play them tough. I think they beat Washington State the next week. They beat Miami and Florida. They move up to the top 15.
Wow, top 15 Indiana team.
So non-conference, they're already at top.
In December, Hoosiers will be ranked in the top 15.
Wow. You've heard it here.
That's
Will?
That's bold. I'm going to follow the trend. I think we're going to hit the over here too. I think they will. I think it'll be a little closer. They might get around that 16th overall ranking. That might be the highest they get. And again, kind of using Steph's logic, I think some of those tough games against opponents like South Carolina and Baylor, they're going to be close. They're going to put up really good battles. I mean, that's going to be tremendous for the RPI. And once they do get to Big Ten, I mean, you're going to see some big-time wins. They're going to surprise some people. And the biggest thing for them, too, how can they handle teams like Maryland and Michigan who picked in the preseason Big Ten polls to be ahead of them? I think they handle those teams very well. I think they surprise a lot of people. I think that will get them, at least at one point in the season, up to that 16, 17 range.
Okay. So I'll take the ball back. Now, I want to address you two on the ends.
Okay.
Who is willing to bite that this team can be top 15? Is anyone going to agree with Jared Rigdon? Top 15 Indiana team. Is anyone willing to bite on that?
I think they can. There's a lot that has to go right. Again, I think they're going to have to pull off a couple upsets at the beginning of the season, especially some of those beginning of the season tournaments, like when they're traveling down to what was it? Like
Virgin Islands?
Yeah, Virgin Islands. Thank you.
Yeah.
Geography guy.
So I think they'll need to do some heavy lifting there while they're still kind of banged up in order to get into the top 15 or even higher. It's plausible. It's certainly plausible. But again, for me, with the injuries and there are still some question marks, like how much can some of their bench players really step up? That's going to determine it. But I think it's plausible. I don't know if it's going to happen, but certainly plausible.
Yeah, I'll agree with Will and Jared. I think it could happen, and there's a good chance it does if the rest of the Big Ten kind of steps up as well. I know we talked about Michigan State and Maryland; they're going to be really good. But if a team like Michigan can step up and make the Big Ten slate look a little bit tougher, at least to the outsiders, to the people that are voting, I think that can move you up as well. And so I think I don't think they're going to get as early as Jared thinks, but I think when conference play kicks off, if you beat Michigan State, if you can beat Michigan, I mean, if you can beat Maryland, go for it. And I think that could end up eventually moving you into a top 15 team. But I won't go much higher than 15.
All right. So, Jared, I'm just going to keep pushing you because we've had a lot of overs so far. You say top 15. Does this team get top 12?
Ooh, top 12. They got to keep rolling after Miami, because after Miami, it gets, Florida and UCLA, but it gets a little weaker right up until you get to Big Ten play. If they can keep rolling, if you get one big win and take the momentum after that.
That's an indecisive answer. Come on. Don't be a coward.
Okay.
Something more solid
All
out
right,
of you.
Steph.
Come on.
All right. I say they get top 12. Why not?
Top 12. All right, I'm going to keep pushing you. Top 10.
Why not?
Can this Indiana team get top 10?
Why not?
Wow.
Wow.
Top 10. I think they could get top 10, but they got to beat Miami and keep rolling after that.
That would be an incredible run.
That's how they do it.
I'm going to say, I get where you're coming from, Jared, and honestly, I think top 10 is plausible, but I mean, everythly everything has to go right.
Yeah, I agree.
Gotta get
the world's got to go perfect for them, but
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen that happen before. I mean, we've seen teams get really hot at the beginning of the season, and I think that they can do that because they have the depth to do that. Even with Bendu Yaney out, Jalen Penn and Pat Berg banged up a little bit, they still have the depth to replace Bendu just for the time being. Obviously, you can't replace what Bendu brings to this team, but you can replace her enough at the beginning of the season to make some noise.
All right. So now last question of our game. If everything goes right, then I think I know where Jared's answer is going with this. But Indiana's going to have a very deep team. They're going to have some standout performers. Last year's leading scorer, Ali Patberg, scored 490 points throughout the season. Will anyone reach that 500-point mark this season? Will, first ball goes to you.
Yes, I think it will be Patberg, actually. Again, on the theme of the shorter depth, they're going to rely on her to score a lot in the early going on the season. The offense is going to be focused more on her, so she'll build up her point totals. Once everyone gets healthy, the depth's going to be there. I think that kind of skewers the scoring for everyone, which is probably ultimately a good thing because you want more people scoring. But I think Patberg's going to have to carry the team in the early going, and that's going to lead to her breaking that 500-point plateau.
All right, Jared, do we get a player to 500 points?
Yep, and I think it is Patberg as well. Last year she said she felt like she was trying to do too much at times while she was handling the point guard responsibilities, trying to learn a new system, as well as put the ball in the bucket. And she said once she plays a little bit off the ball, at the same time also being able to be the point guard, I think that's going to open her up offensively. She's going to find her stroke early in the year. I think she gets over 500 points. I don't think it's much over 500, but I think, the offense, this still goes through Patberg. She's your best offensive player on this team, and, she's going to find a way to, help IU get some big points in big times.
Yeah, I'll agree with you guys. I think Ali Patberg is easily going to get over 500 points. I mean, look at how close she was last year, and that was battling some injuries too. Obviously, as you guys mentioned, a perfect world. She doesn't get injured at all throughout the season, but you go into the season not planning to get injured. So I think Ali can definitely get over, and I think Jalen Penn can as well if she starts just playing a little bit more consistency. I mean, we saw some 30-point performances out of her last year, especially in some big moments. Jalen Penn can be really good, especially when she's feeling it from behind the arc. The only thing is we saw at times that she would go out there and get a 30-point performance, come back with a single-digit performance. So if she can battle that inconsistency a little bit, start playing, not to repeat myself, but start playing a little bit more consistently, I think she can also get over that 500-point mark.
So consistency, is that what I'm getting out of you?
Yeah, consistency. I mean,
Okay, I'm glad we've established
consistency in life is pretty important.
Yes.
It is.
All right. Now I'll take the ball back as we get into our last segment here on the toss-up. This is our quick fire round. So I'm just giving you a question. You've got 20 seconds or less, so I'm really speeding this up on you guys. To answer my question, give as much reasoning as you can in that amount of time. Ball's going to be coming around pretty quick, too. So, Steph, we're starting with you. Who is, at the end of the season, the IU Player of the Year?
Well, luckily I get to go first, so I'll go Ali Patberg. I think best scorer on the team, best player on the team. She's going to be most important.
Quick and easy.
Brenna Wise, she won't be the leading scorer. The only senior on the team. They need that from her. Veteran leadership, help them get farther in the tournament this year.
I'm going to go with Grace Berger. I think she's going to fill in big time while Bendu Yaney and the rest of the team is still kind of in recovery mode at the beginning of the season. Coach has talked about it a lot. She thinks this is going to be a breakout year for Grace Berger, and I have to agree. I think this is where she really shines.
So now, IU Underclassmen of the Year, not necessarily one of the biggest contributors, maybe still. Who do you think? Will, I'll just give it right back to you. I don't know why I took it.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I'm going to switch it up a little bit because obviously Grace Berger and underclassmen.
Don't want you to repeat the answers here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Jory Allen. Miss Indiana basketball last year as a senior in high school. Real talented, versatile as well. She's one of those players can slot in 3, 4, or 5. She's going to make her presence known. I think she's going to get a lot of playing time from the entire season, not just at the beginning of the year. She's going to be a pretty key factor in that rotation.
In an effort to change it up, I'll go Alexa Golbe. I think she had flashes of, pretty bright potential last year, and I think she figures a way to, become a more key contributor on this team.
Shook me up there. I think I'm going to go with Chanel Wilson. I've talked a little bit about her already so far, but I think with IU trying to find a point guard that can slot Allie Patberg at the 2, I think that's going to be Chanel Wilson. I think people forget that she was supposed to be really good, battled some injuries last year. She's got some athleticism, and I think she's going to be a breakout player for IU this season.
All right, so now we're going to switch it up and talk about the conference as a whole. In the Big Ten, relatively tough conference, where does IU finish in the Big Ten? I'm going to give it back to Will because you just tossed it back to me.
That's fair.
Yeah. Well, man, I've been going back and forth. I think ultimately though they finished 3rd in conference. I think that's the safest bet. Again, Maryland is kind of that upper echelon in terms of the Big Ten. They'll make some noise. They'll compete with Maryland. Maybe Michigan State finishes in front of them, but I think that's where they're going to be, especially once they get healthy. Come Big Ten play, that's when they're going to be at full strength, and they're going to finish well above that 8-10 mark.
They'll finish 4th. They get the double bye. Maryland, Michigan State, Michigan. IU is the number 4 seed.
I'm going to go with Will. I'm going to say 3. I think Maryland, Michigan State, they're going to get that 1-2. I think Michigan's going to be a really good team, but I think as times throughout the season, they might be a little bit inconsistent. That kind of allows Indiana to take that 3 spot.
All right. Now, last question. At the end of the season, I'm going to give it back to you because I snubbed you last time. What is the farthest that IU goes in any of the tournaments, whether that be Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament, if they make a run into the NIT? Where does their season end? How far do they go?
Well, I don't think it'll be in the NIT. I think they're definitely making the tournament. That should be a lock, especially when you're a preseason ranked team. But I think the furthest this team will go is Sweet 16. Now, obviously, you win some games, you make it, get some lucky bounces, get an injury to another opponent, you make it farther. But I'm going to say Sweet 16 is their peak right now.
I think when they get Bendu Yaney back and healthy, I think this team will start to come together. I think they host a regional, and then I think they make it to the Sweet 16.
Bold predictions from Jared.
They're going to be they might be a top 10 team, but only make it to the Sweet 16.
Steph, I don't
Say they're going
I don't need this now. I don't need this now. I haven't seen the draw yet, okay, Steph?
You haven't seen the draw?
I'm not making March predictions in
months
October.
in advance. You don't have that yet. You're predicting an IU upset?
I can't see the future, Steph.
Well, for me, I think if we're talking Big Ten tournament, I think they make it to the Big Ten tournament final, and then NCAA tournament. That's definitely where they're going to be. I'd have to agree too. I think Sweet 16 is kind of where they finished this year. Another step forward. Last year 32, this year 16. Maybe next year Elite 8.
Awesome. That sounds good. Now, it sounds like we eased off of the bold predictions that we had earlier, but that's fine. I guess that's how we're going to end our show.
Maybe Jared with the bold predictions.
Okay. We're gonna throw it all on Jared. That's what we're gonna. So on that note, we'll just leave you with that, and that does do it for our show this week. But be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports as well. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you might have. So toss it up and find out if we catch it. We'll see you next time.